Today we're going to talk about something that I have coined in a poem many years ago called the Dagger of Goodwill. The Dagger of Goodwill is the concept that someone uses your good nature and your pure heart against you. And it happens every single day in the world. And it is the fuel and the strategy behind agenda after agenda. And I think I want you guys to be extremely aware of it if you possibly can, because I know that you feel it. But I want to coin that phrase in your mind, Dagger of Goodwill. The poem was about someone forging a dagger and doing an amazing job forging this dagger. And they forge it out of every quality that is in you. And they turn around and stab you in the back with it. United States of America has acquired atrocious private for-profit mandated health care with absolutely no price regulations, with flimsy non-contractual obligations or commitments that it wasn't going to cost much money. For those of you who've run a company and you've bought insurance for your employees, which I've done, there's a group, and the more people you put in that group, the lower your premium is, because you're distributing the odds of someone passing away, and it's all balanced on, it's all calculated based on how healthy everyone is. If you get a big, giant, healthy group, then the premiums go down. You have a couple people with cancer, it could go up a little bit. But that's just one avenue where someone used your goodwill. Don't you want everyone to have health coverage? Don't you want that? I mean, a good person would want that, wouldn't they? And then they stick you with this lobbyist-written bill. I mean, the very law that has been signed by the President of the United States, and he's just a puppet, right? But the very law, every clause, every factor in the contract was written by the health industry, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, with their profit margins. Remember what I said about corporations and corporatism? The only thing that matters in a corporation is the profits. So how do you think that was built? It was built against you. But that's just insurance, right? The Dagger of Goodwill is extended into the healthcare system to make parents feel guilty if they do not vaccinate their children. Yet the parents that feel most obligated to do so are the least scientifically minded individuals. But they have a hubris, an arrogance that won't let them admit that to themselves, that they haven't really learned anything about science or biology or medicine. But they're the ones that will walk next door and go, "Are your kids saved by vaccinations?" Dagger of Goodwill. I talk about on the show several times that religion is co-opted. Religion, usually in its pure form, if it doesn't have infidel passages in it, which very few do, actually, right? Can't convince an American of that, but yeah. Most Qurans don't have infidel passages in them, if they were printed more than, say, 20 years ago. But in order to get closer to your God, you were sold this bill of goods that you have to go kill people that aren't like you. Crafting this weird religious obedience in the form of a dagger and sticking you with it, you lose your own life, family members' lives, your offspring. It's a disease. And right now, in September of 2015, immigration is now a massive concept. Now, immigration is one of these things that's sort of an extension of why we give money to homeless people. In our mind, we think we're the haves and they're the have-nots. And so we scoop up a little bit of what we don't use and we hand it off to somebody else. That's kind of a cool concept. We probably do that all the time with our friends and family. "Oh, no, you can have my food. I'm totally stuffed." When it comes to immigration, the agendas are usually pretty deep. And I think that, and we wrote an article on One Page News, and we mentioned it several times on the show, which is that people live in these amazing countries with this amazing land, with this amazing history, and yet they're leaving to come to a place that is not as beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. We got different pockets of beauty. But they're giving up their sovereignty, their sovereign land, their history. They've been there for several hundred years. God knows how many hundreds, if not thousands of years, their relatives live there, right? South of the border of United States, we have all the Latin countries, which have an amazing history, right? As I mentioned before, they have pyramids, man. They have amazing pyramids, and they have an amazing culture that is no longer there called the Mayans, right? And the Mayans have one of the most organically beautiful hieroglyph writings of any civilization that's lived on this planet Earth. In fact, I'm just going to say it is the most gorgeous, partially translated phonetic or iconic vernacular in world history. Now, it's not the only reason to stay there, of course, right? But the land is lush. Got coasts on both sides because it tapers as you go south. I've asked some of the most wealthy people in the world to name their favorite vacation places. And usually northern Italy will come up, but Costa Rica comes up, and various other locations in Mexico come up, and other Latin countries. These are people that can go anywhere in the whole world, and they go south of the border, at least half the time. So what's really, really strange is that your government will come to you and guilt trip you about taking on people from other countries. And this is now becoming a global issue. Europe, for the very first time in their freaking history, for at least the last couple thousand years, is finally having to take on some of the same things that America's been dealing with for several hundred years, ever since we started, right? Now, America has sort of figured out the formula for absorbing and turning people into perfect citizens balanced with everything else, right? But let's just take some inventory of the situation that's going on right now. A couple situations that I think are absolutely identical according to propaganda. One we know is true, one is probably propaganda. Our military is in Eurasia, in the Middle East, right? And we're taking over Syria slowly. We're not really physically admitting that we're there, but we have created this little thing called ISIS, and we give them all of our weaponry from the United States military. We make sure they have dope-ass vehicles to drive around in. We never attack them, right? We know exactly where they are at all times. We watch them on video. Reuters comes out and covers a 3-day piece of them destroying artifacts, but no one rushes in to kill them. I don't even know why Syria doesn't go in to get them. I feel like the whole thing's fake. But the rationale for Americans is that the Assad family is a horrible family that apparently all the citizens actually like over there. Sorry to spoil your hatred game. They don't mind the guy at all and his family. And we're taking him out because he's got oil and currency. Currency that's not connected to our crappy currency, and oil that we want to, the World Bank and IMF, want to use to empower the US dollar, euro, and all their little sub-fiat currencies, right? All right. So we completely rationalize that. And now there's a giant exodus coming out of Syria, which is flooding into Europe. And it's all designed to make Europe hate the problem so that they all come on board for hating Syria, and then we get rid of the Syrian problem. They're only leaving Syria because ISIS is in there messing with everything, because there's a bunch of weird phantom troops that don't have, made in wherever they're made from on their badge, right? But we've seen videos, on YouTube of gangsters, literally gangbangers from Los Angeles, over there getting paid to shoot random stuff. It's weird. Now, that's one thing. That's recent, right? They incubated that up from nothing. But now we have this issue that's been going on for decades, which is the immigration from Latin America to North America. And we have a pretty strong relationship there. We have corporate relationships that seem to work out. We tend to get along, honestly, right? But there's something wrong, at least with Mexico and specifically, that the individuals from that country don't want to be there anymore and they want to move up. Now, you could say, it's the land of opportunity in America. That's why they want to come up here. Well, they'll definitely get paid a bigger wage up here. That's for sure. And because the government and the 39 families that control Mexico have crunched wages and absolutely corrupted the layer of government that's there, nothing's happening for the people, right? Totally disarmed, right? They have something called federales, right? And this is a police force that runs all over the country. Back in the 80s, my buddies used to go down there and mess around on the weekend, Tijuana. And they had all kinds of scams that would be set up. One, the federales might just walk up to you and say, show me your papers or whatever, let me see what's in your pockets. Or they'll actually have someone come up to you, bump into you, and point at the federales and say, this guy just started a fight with me. Then they would come over and shake you down and throw you into prison. And all the federales want is money. It's just a money game to exert their power on you and steal your cash. When I was a manager at Electronic Arts, we had a whole clan of folks go down to Mexico, and 2 or 3 of them got thrown in jail, and we had to use our attorneys and pay off these fucking federale guys to get our guys out. A couple of them were some of my female employees from Singapore. So, if you're thinking about my guys going down there and causing problems, some of these people had no idea how to cause a problem. They were just vulnerable looking, and they were grabbed. Horrible, right? Then I thought, okay, so when I grew up in that situation, when I first came to California, because we don't go to Mexico from Kansas, I thought, well, it's just an American gringo problem when we go down. All right, well, there's probably more jerk-offs that go down there when they're drunk and cause problems, so we probably are a problem down there. And then I saw my employees go down. I thought, well, this seems to be more of a widespread issue, right? And I'm still thinking it's just a profit game to take money from the haves, It's cheap enough when you go down there that, you'll spend nothing on your trip. So if you have to give $500 to the federale guy to get out of prison, well, that's normally what your trip would cost if you'd done in America. I was rationalizing in a million different ways. It's all bullshit. It shouldn't occur, right? But then I helped a buddy of mine who ran a restaurant, and the cooks were kind of a rotating group of guys. And most of them had some paperwork that made them legal to work here. But I remember one of them was a long-time worker, fully legal. He had to leave for like 3 to 6 months. And he had to leave because his family member got thrown in jail, his father, by the federales. He was coming home from work, and somebody wanted money. Grabbed the guy, threw him into prison. $500. Then it turned into $1,000. Then it turned into $5,000. This kid had to work his ass off here in Southern California to earn that cash, and he had 4 or 5 other family members working in California and in the United States to create the cash flow to go back down there to pay off some asshole who was just being a bully, right? Well, I think it's pretty evident by now that the drug trade as well, which has been predominantly Colombian, is now being moved up to the upper hemispheres of South America, and there's a lot of growing and manufacturing and processing going on in Mexico, and then eventually distribution, right? Seems to have completely fallen out of the press that the general attorney, Holden, inherited a project that was feeding guns and money down to our cartel members, right? I don't think it's a big mystery that our Central Intelligence Agency, they get all the processed heroin and cocaine and they distribute it all over the United States, right? This has been revealed by Berkeley studies where the top professors did the logistics on how much cocaine and heroin is consumed in this country on a daily basis and how many C-130s would have to fly in this country on a daily basis just to distribute the amount that we consume. Forget weed, forget a bunch of pill pop and a meth, just cocaine, derivative drugs, and heroin derivative drugs. And this is not the pharmaceutical use of opium. This is just straight up illegal drugs on the street. And they were talking about a fleet of C-130s on a daily basis to have to come in and constantly resupply the major cities and then the rural areas of America. One thing Michael Rupert tracked beautifully, because he was recruited to be one of the agents to actually help manage the flow of drugs into America, and he said, no, thank you. And he was willing to keep his mouth shut, but they thought he was going to be a liability. And so when they started roughing him up and messing up his office, and one particular evening he said he was shot at, it's a police record of the whole event, he walked into a press conference, kind of a live show with I think it was Watts here in L.A., with the head of the CIA in there. He walked in and said, I've got proof that you guys are distributing coke and distributing heroin, and you recruited me. And I said no, and you haven't left me alone since, and I got the proof. And his life turned to shit right after that, right? But immigration, which I'm just going to take a little pause on with this Dagger of Goodwill, is something that it hurts us because we look at other people suffering. And I think that until the machine of society rips out empathy and then eventually sympathy, right? Empathy goes first because it's a more complex thought, which is I'm imagining how you feel. Sympathy is I feel sorry for you, right? So the first one that disappears is empathy. Second one, sympathy. And entitlement just makes them both go by the wayside, right? So as we raise this giant multi-million population of millennials that are supposed to get everything for free, and because of cell phones alone, we tell our children, you're supposed to get a game console and a cell phone plan and a car and car insurance. It just never stops, right? Consumerism is completely out of control. But when we see people suffering, we want to help them. But why is it that we're willing to go 8,000 miles away to rough up a country called Syria, which hasn't done anything to us? We don't have any immigration from them to us personally, right? Well, there might be a few boated over in the next few months here, just to make a point. But we have millions coming up from the South in America. It's because they're suffering down there. That's why they come up here. Why on earth would you give up your right to be in the country you're born in, the country that has the culture and the history of your own people? Why would you give that up? It's because shit got bad. You know? The country doesn't have modern amenities in a lot of the cities, right? Mexico City, a big giant explosion of methane exploded under Mexico City, one of the biggest cities in the world, population density-wise, right? The sewer systems down below are just ancient. It's just gravity-driven sewer systems. And the methane built up, and something ignited and blew the living shit out of a bunch of the streets. Created a seismic earthquake. It was so massive, right? When are we going to go help our Mexican brothers and sisters down south? When is that going to happen? We know they're suffering. You know? Every single problem has a cause and it has a symptom, right? Immigration, under any circumstance, is the symptom of a bigger problem. Constantly, right? There's absolutely no reason in the world why someone should have to migrate out of their country unless perhaps they're not from there and then they just simply don't have any loyalty and they just move around, right? We know what's wrong with Mexico. But guess what's happening in America? We exploit it. We exploit it 100%. Not a lot of people realize, Clinton has a really good history with most citizens of the United States, and it's because he presided over the economic boom of the internet. So a lot of people made a lot of money during that phase, and so they have great memories. And he was definitely a lot looser than Bush Sr. But at the very, very end of his term, he set up America to fail on a level that is unimaginable. He did it very specifically. He pardoned a bunch of criminals. He repealed the Glass-Steagall Act. And one of the things he did with China especially was he gave them permanent favorable trade status and made it illegal, sort of, to ever say that their treatment of human beings was ever going to be a factor in whether or not we traded with them. So it doesn't matter after 1999. It doesn't matter how bad China treats its people. Clinton set it up so that it will never matter. And now his wife, who's 50 times as evil, who has 50 times the crimes that he does, is running for president. She's running for president as an unconvicted felon who has held trade secrets on a private server in her bathroom, in a closet, who attempted to erase it, who even searched on Google to say how to erase emails off a server, right? She's running for president. We have a bona fide criminal running for president who should be charged right now and put in jail. Because we already know that this has taken place. You're talking about getting caught red-handed, right? That means the video is you doing something, stealing something out of someone's house, right? She's been caught utterly red-handed and scientifically red-handed. This isn't something you can infer, or that you can interpret. It's 100% illegal for her to have that server and have one United States email exclusively travel to that server. She could maybe take copies of top secret, non-top secret emails to her server, but she could never take anything that was top secret. And she took everything and had it shipped directly to that server. She could have sold trade secrets to someone, backstabbed this country. I mean, that's what she does all day long, but she could have done something. If you think she's good, she could have flipped the other script, and because she's so old, she could have taken $20 million for a couple emails to China. Who knows, right? $100 million. Who knows, right? All right, enough of Hillary for a split second. We're going to continue to give her shit until you guys repeat it every day of your life, right? So the other thing is we're really, really close to Mexico, and we know everybody down there. We do. We know all the families that no one else knows. Our government does. We know all the politicians that get installed by the Bilderberg Group. And we can offer them incentives as well. But right now, corporations are moving their corporations out of America into these other countries and exploiting the people. And supposedly it's good for them, right? But they still want to come here because they know it's slave labor at that company, at the Walmart down there, at the Ford company, at the Oreo cookie company that's been moved over there, right? They know it's slave labor within that building. China is so far away, it's very, very difficult to save money and get to America, right? So they're stuck in a few domesticated cities that actually let them build iPhones for nothing, right? When do we solve all these problems? Well, the first thing that we have to do, which is why I call this the Dagger of Goodwill, is we have to understand how many daggers are being built out there out of our goodwill. How many charitable organizations take every dime for themselves and give a couple pennies to the organization that they're actually supposed to be raising the money for? It's so bad in America that I simply don't give money to anybody anymore, right? I used to give to the Christian Children's Fund and sponsor a kid until I figured out that the ratio was 22 cents of every dollar actually goes to the kid and the rest gets sucked up by a bunch of white executives, right? Numbers probably vary to this day, but every time I go to the a fast food place, do you want to give $1? Go to Walgreens, do you want to give $1? Someone's always raising money. You have no fucking idea how that money's being distributed. So don't give it. I guarantee you, very little of it goes to the actual source. People donate like crazy. I was at a Kid Rock concert the other day, and it was absolutely phenomenal. He was selling his album for $10, and he was giving out every single dime to the Shriner Hospital Foundation. Phenomenal sacrifice on his part. There must have been, my God, 10,000, 15,000 people in that concert. Place was utterly packed. I couldn't see the back of everybody. I could definitely see the front. It was just massive. So he's got goodwill because he's a good guy. And most of us are good people too. Almost all of us, right? But we're being taken advantage of. And we're having laws passed, and political correctness is completely based on the Dagger of Goodwill. Oh, you're calling a person suddenly, right? The word that you were using that was perfectly fine for 50 years is all of a sudden demonized. And you got to think up a new word because this person's been taught that that's offensive. They've been taught that all of a sudden they're being offended. I think we should just call every single area of political correctness just a color. Maybe just a Pantone number. He's not mentally handicapped. He's blue 53. And you can't get offended after that, right? But the Dagger of Goodwill is a disease. It's the absolute fabric. It is the nitrate in the explosion of crazy in this world. And we have to heighten our awareness to it, and we have to flush it. And then once we get rid of all of this Dagger of Goodwill, then you can see reality for what it really is, right? And stop reacting to the symptom of everything and get to the cause. You just need to always ask, when you're faced with someone presenting a dilemma to you, you want to go to the cause, right? Most parents try to go to the cause of their children's ailments, right? But we somehow lose that brilliance when we go deal with politics, deal with the suffering of another nation. Like I said in one of my previous episodes here, We're buying products from companies that are using pure slave labor. And we kind of, because we're so addicted to consumerism, we kind of say, well, it just has to be that way. Or I really want this shirt, right? This shirt was bought for me by a friend, but I guarantee you it's probably made in some sweatshop somewhere. I helped a woman who was in Los Angeles about 5 years ago, and she was dealing in these premium sweaters that all these celebrities were wearing. And, she was getting them made in Brazil by some folks that didn't get paid much. And it was almost as if, when I was a kid, in my little hometown, we had a garment factory that made garments for people, for little kids, right? So they got paid normal American wages, and they made quality garments and sold them to American kids. Perfect, right? And it's not bad if it's made in a different country. It just, we have to make sure that those individuals are getting paid competitive rates for what the cost of living is in their world. So the pattern I want to suggest that we install, right? This is painfully evident, but again, we don't talk about it, which is, as all this bone-crushing pressure comes in for immigration, right? Because, again, most of us don't want anyone to hurt. If you got a bad situation where you are, we don't want you to have that bad situation. But for the same reason that if everybody in your neighborhood stopped buying food and started starving to death, and it's food's right down the street, they just need to go get it, right? There's animals they could hunt, but they don't hunt. But you do every day. You constantly go down to the grocery store and buy food and hunt animals or whatever the hell it takes to feed yourself. You can't just call up all your neighbors and say, come to my house. I'll use my hard-earned money and my labor to feed all of you, and somehow you've forgotten how to do it. That would never happen, and that's like an obvious thing. Well, America can't absorb every single person that wants to be here. And they shouldn't need to be here. They shouldn't. Especially if their country is repressed. Now, if someone just wants to expand their horizons, they love what they're doing where they are, they've got some sharp skills, they come to America. Usually citizenship in America is granted on trying to make sure, and it's the same way in Europe, you have to prove that your skills are actually going to increase pretty much the gross national product of that country. You're going to have to be able to do something that's rare, that's in short supply in the country that you're going to, and then they'll grant you citizenship. It's kind of cool. So if there's any migration coming out of a country, immediately we have to go look at the country and say, what's going on here? With Syria, it's totally in unrest, right? And there's plenty of other countries that are messed with by military operations, but that's fairly rare, Most of it is allowing a country to be repressed. And what are the 3 top countries that are repressed in the world, right? Mexico, as far as I know, has the largest span between the ultra-rich and the ultra-poor. We're talking about people with every amenity in the world to people that have to throw their stool out the window, India. India's number 2 for poverty versus rich, right? Anyone who saw Slumdogs, it's a fictional thing on top of a real situation over there. My whole adult life, I would say from like the last 30 years of my life, I've seen video after video of these horrible locations in India where it's everyone living in shacks down miles and miles and miles of just shacks, and there's barely any plumbing, there's hardly any electricity unless you're stealing it off wires from the mainland, and then it butts right up next to mansions and condominiums and the politicians that run the place. But no one rises up and does anything. And so the second that someone can get out of that pressure, they come to America and they set up shop. And some of these people, I have to say, of all walks, of everyone I'm talking about, have done amazing things and contributed amazing things to this country. So immigration, taking on individuals from other countries works, right? America has benefited tremendously. I'm an immigrant. I am, right? My first family member came over in 1630. The rest in the 1800s, right? And I'm hoping that the majority of my family has brought skills that were necessary, right? And of course, it's atrocious that the Native Americans had to be pushed out at the same time because it wasn't necessary. We just needed to blend ourselves, right, and educate each other on each other and be good. But of course, we're just xenophobic. And we have to kill everything that's not like us, right? Because Europeans are extremely xenophobic, right? America is now more xenophobic, right? But the next country is China. And China is almost an enigma to us because there's Western citizens are only usually predominantly aware of the very small portion of China that's domesticated. I should say westernized. Dealing with Chinese manufacturing and Chinese film stuff and video game stuff, I have been privy to just tremendous efforts, hundreds of millions of dollars at companies I've worked for trying to set up shop in China. And China's gigantor, right? It's way bigger than the United States. But, of course, if you look at NASA satellites, the United States is nearly as big as Africa. See our Facebook page for a great example by our buddy Jared. But China is largely in the past. Most of the country, by a long shot, way more than, say, 60% of the physical real estate in China is living like China lived 150 years ago. They just are. And it's really the this bottom eastern portion here that has unbelievable advanced societies, right? Hong Kong, which has obviously been a British province for a really long time, is phenomenally off the charts in terms of super duper tech and really incredible skyscrapers and downtown areas that are super technical. It's a bit like Tokyo on steroids. But most of the country is suffering. Or not westernized, I would say. But I would say they suffer because they don't get the standard welfare that the other part gets. And so these iPhone factories that are built over there, and it's every single factory over there, but you people migrating from these more dormant areas, these more regressed areas over to the city. And it's a huge culture shock, right? These kids are barely, they're just born, and as soon as they can work, they come down. And there's a bunch of rumors about the ages being way below 18 working in there. And what's weird about that, I will say this, I work like crazy from 14 and up, right? I don't understand why a kid can't work, right? This whole idea that you can't work until, we're not going to pull an 8-hour shift when you're 14 or even more, right? America's had work camps forever. Late 1800s, people don't realize that America was actually taking children away from families and shipping them off to factories, and that's where we got the labor laws in the turn of the 18th and 19th century, or 1800s, 1900s. But we're empowering this whole thing to happen. And what's really, really weird about it is that we hear all the time that China's going to be the next superpower. I was reading 2 or 3 financial mags yesterday, mass media stuff, and it was the general consensus, and everybody was copying and pasting the Reuters AP articles about China, talking about their stock market and all this other stuff. But they said, well, it's definitely going to be the biggest economy in the world, and by at least 2050, because they have the most people in the world. Now, again, 60% of their population by 2050 is going to be dead, because they're really old right now and they're simply going to expire, right? So their population is going to reduce quite a bit, but regardless of the math on that, they only get to become a superpower because they're being entirely exploited. If they have to pay their people a decent wage, well, they're going to not be able to give us toys for the price that Americans are going to be able to pay, right? And so the whole thing is predicated, right, on suffering. But if you have to deal with the outcome of that, the immigration outcome of that, then it's the Dagger of Goodwill that makes it possible for you to stick to it and to support it without any logic at all, right? We have to be hyper aware of this formula because it's starting to be used more and more and more and more every single day. That may come as no surprise to anyone that education is the only thing that fixes all this stuff, right? A lot of these countries are finding out how the West operates. And unfortunately, they're coming to the Western countries to take it instead of fighting for their own countries. Now, I have a concern that goes like this. America and some European countries have built up their real estate by fighting for what they wanted, right? And unfortunately, again, if someone gets squashed almost every time land is taken, no matter where they are in history, there was somebody there before you, and you had to wipe them off the map. I think in the more primitive days, it makes more sense. And in the modern age of, say, America, we didn't necessarily have to take anything from the Native Americans. We just needed to share the space. But whatever, it happened. It's horrific. But that's where we are today. So America's founded with the Constitution, as we go on about on the show. Second Amendment helps us protect ourselves against a tyrannical government. It's not just for hunting. In fact, very few people in America actually hunt, to be honest, right? Take all the population in the major cities and add them all up and ask them who hunts. Very few people hunt. The majority of the Midwest hunt off and on throughout their seasons, but they're not that densely populated. So out of 350 million, you again have a very small percentage of people who buy guns to hunt. They buy guns to protect themselves against the 1 in a million home invader, and they buy guns to sit and wait to see if tyrannical movements happen to spill over into society. And again, that's probably 1 in a billion. But we still protect ourselves. Just the sheer gun sales in America keeps our country at bay from doing anything crazy via the European banking cartel that tells our fake politicians what to do, right? So now, what if you take the fabric of this country? Let's just go with America, because it's the only one I really know intimately, right? And it's built out of these meat-eating, gun-toting Americans. Stupid or smart, that's what we are. At least we understand the concept of freedom. On its fundamental level, we don't exactly know who to fight to keep it. We bullshit ourselves that Middle Eastern people are actually causing freedom problems for us. And of course, we shut down our Constitution as a result of an attack from one of them because we're so smart. Now, what if you import exclusively a population from wherever, doesn't matter where, who are unwilling to fight for freedom in their own country? They're unwilling to rise up against their government and take them out. What if you bring that faculty, that mind share to this country of America? If you were to weave the consciousness of America into a quilt, and you could only consider a human being's mind a thread if they understand freedom and if they're willing to die for it, then we're going to have giant holes in this quilt. The more that we bring in people that will not fight for freedom, that just simply want to escape to a country and stand on the shoulders of giants who are willing to fight for freedom. What happens when we get invaded by someone, or our country goes tits up and, a bunch of dopey kids are convinced to go door to door and rape the Constitution, everything that they're supposedly standing for? Let's say that weird 1 in a gazillion chance happens. Well, they know that there are definitely doors where it's never going to be a problem. And if they just go to each immigrant door and say, "Okay, give me your guns," they're like, "We don't even have any. We never had any before. We don't have any now. So take whatever you want," right? Tyranny is here. Put the stamp on the door. This one's taken over. Now, luckily, we don't really have a gigantic population problem where we're missing giant portions of the quilt. But if this continues unabated, without the wherewithal, that freedom is something that every human being needs to fight for, right? This is not just an American concept. We're just obsessed with it, And of course, we look like assholes because we have guns, right? And the people are like, "Why do you need guns?" It's like, hey, dude, it's not for me to kill you, brother. Okay? But if someone comes and tries to take over this country, I can guarantee you I'm not fucking going anywhere, right? Some foreign country is going to lose relatives on that day. Guarantee it. Guarantee. I will personally make some widows out of these motherfuckers in 2 seconds, right? But that's because I understand that living without freedom isn't worth shit, right? And of course, freedom is an illusion. Yeah. But guess what? I'm recording this right now. In some countries, I'd be snatched up in the middle of the night making a tape like this, It's really interesting. There's a lot of countries out there that are thought to be free, but Americans have no idea what happens in the middle of the night with these individuals. I've got friends that at times have lived in the Philippines. And a buddy of mine from here went there and started emailing me, and then he came over here for a little short visit to visit his family, and we had a little beer together, and he's like, "Dude, you got to understand," he goes, "people in my neighborhood disappear because they're activists." He goes, "He had a kid down the street that had a blog in the Philippines," and I don't know what the hell the guy was saying. I don't follow them at all. But the dude was snatched up in the middle of the night. So I went and looked it up. And there's hundreds of families looking for their relatives in the Philippines because that's how they roll. You do not talk about the government in any negative way, shape, or form. I mean, just think about the alternate media sources out there that just lambast the United States of America because we love our country. We are a less is more sort of group of people. We just want our inalienable rights to be protected, right? We don't want the 16th Amendment, but we want the first 10 easily, right? It's the most masterful piece of work besides perhaps Bibles out there that wrote about how to behave, right? But the Dagger of Goodwill goes very, very deep because I'm giving you examples at a government level, right? At a corporate level. Corporations want to guilt you into vaccinations. Governments are so bought off, right, that we got this health care that's been written by the industries. They're going to literally profit from it. As I've said on the show, men have to buy, baby insurance, like we're going to have babies, right? Women that have had hysterectomies, that gone through menopause, are still buying birthing insurance as if they can have kids. Guys with their tubes tied are having to buy insurance like they can have kids. How insane is that, right? And the group that has been created by all this Obamacare fucking repression, this tyrannical bullshit that we have to buy this stuff and it's a mandatory thing, right? The group is so huge now that the rates should be utterly a couple $100 for a family of 4, right? And let's just not overlook the fact that there's 900,000 veterans waiting for insurance right now in America. In this line of crap that you can't be turned down for Obamacare. You absolutely can't. I got 2 friends that are waiting right now, and there's 900,000 soldiers that went and risked their life for war. Some of them maimed, okay, because they fought for bankers. And the bankers don't have the wherewithal to take care of these folks to keep the engine going. There's some people that will do the very bare minimum to get what they want, and bankers are the worst at it, right? They think you're sheep. And so when you go off and fight for them, they don't give a fuck, right? The second they can stop paying you, the second you become invalid or infirm because you have lost a leg or something, it's like, get this kid off the books as fast as possible. Sew him up, send him home, deny every piece of health care with PTSD stuff, right? Just fuck them. That's what they say. But there's a bumper sticker on a car that says support our troops because that bumper sticker is built out of a Dagger of Goodwill, right? But it's only the citizens that care about the citizens. None of the politicians care. How does any politician on the Hill get reelected right now with 900,000 veterans looking for health care? And, of course, there's millions of veterans that have crappy health care, and the veteran hospitals won't take care of them and all this other stuff. How's that even possible? How's that possible that you fight for their money systems? You take over oil in sovereign countries and give them to these bankers, and they get to just scoop in the control, right? But they don't do anything for you. Immigration's weird because it's a two-sided blade. On one side of the blade, you're to care because they're suffering. And you're supposed to take your wealth and your hard-earned money and put it in tax systems that then get fed to these folks that come over. But on the flip side of that blade, you're not to give a shit that they're being forced to leave their countries. You don't care, right? I mean, you do. You personally do. But how many times do you wake up in the morning when you get out of bed? I mean, there's a million things to worry about, and we got to pick how much negativity we take in ourselves. But as the issue is pressed, hopefully at that moment in your consciousness, everything crashes in there, and somebody says, well, we got to provide for the immigrants. And you go, well, why don't we just provide them with freedom? Why don't we go down and make sure the tyrannical governments are wiped out, the federales are wiped out? Give them a real police force with a real paycheck so they don't have to rape everybody for money. Take anybody who's putting someone in prison to extort money out of them and throw them into prison for the rest of their fucking lives. Why isn't that just a knee-jerk reaction for us? It's because we have this blanket of consumerism on top of us, which defines us, right? Remember, George Carlin nailed it in the 90s when he said, we are a mall nation in America. It's all consumerism. You have nothing to do with your life. Well, go to the mall. Buy that one thing that'll make you happy during the purchase process and the infinite dreams you have with this object or this thing, and it only lasts for the drive home. And the second you get it home, you put it down and you fuck if you even think about it. Now, some people would hear the idea about taking over their country, and they think, oh my God, you're talking about a bloodbath, right? Well, it could be, I guess, right? Every country's done it at least a couple times, usually. But what I think is interesting is there's a guy who wrote a book called The Economic Hitman. I forgot his name. A lot of you know his name. But he talks about in his book that he was a CIA agent that was actually part of a, or maybe he was a consultant for banks. I think he was a consultant for the IMF, I think. I'm not sure if he had a CIA card or not. But whatever, he talks about in no uncertain terms. And he's never been contradicted. He's never been taken to task for it. No one's ever said he's wrong. But he basically documented a big portion of the 60s and 70s where he worked for these organizations as they would destroy countries in South America. Europe went to South America, and they pay off a little militia to go up to City Hall and basically throw out all the politicians, whatever, their big government body. Instantaneously, the puppet politicians would come in, extremely well-funded. They're all employees of the IMF, World Bank. And, of course, their short-term reward was, hey, we'll give you a ton of money, and you just have to fuck over everybody in your country. And in some cases, they weren't from the countries, but they had the same skin color, so everybody thought they were. And amazingly, these people would obviously sign away all the resources of the country by taking loans from the IMF. They're backed by land resources. The loan is designed to immediately go tits up, just like they did with Russia. And immediately, all the major corporations of Europe own everything that they own. Or did own. All the sovereign land is gone. That was done with an extremely tiny contingency of individuals with just a lot of money. And it was took a lot of money because they were basically paying for crimes. But now you flip that script and you say, all right, South America was largely consumed by Europe, with very little body counts doing the dirty work. All right, why don't we do it again? Why doesn't everyone down there just do it again? Very few people it takes to take over these countries, and then elect somebody, right? Go to your universities. There's brilliant people all over the world in every single country. And I mean every single country. You can go to the most repressed educational country in the world, and there's a frickin' genius who knows every single division. There's one in every division of everything from economics to science, etc., politics, foreign policy, trade. They know it all. There's probably a dozen in every country minimum, right? So harvest those individuals and put them in there. Get your game plan together. But supposedly America cares, right? Our way to help them in America is to send them a factory and get them to work more slave labor jobs. And we're like, oh, look how many jobs we created in that foreign country. It's like, okay, $2 a day. Yeah, it's killing it, man, right? And of course, they don't make even a fingerprint on the amount of people without jobs down there, right? Monsanto has moved into all these countries and is just destroying farmers left and right, right? They spray their seeds over your land, and then they send in the attorneys with approval from the shill politicians to say, you owe us money because you're growing our seed. And guys like, I've never met you guys. I've never taken your seed, and I don't want your seed. In South America, they have corn seeds that have been handed down from their family, forever. The corn grows and drops seeds, and they harvest that and they replant, right? They have very specific tastes, colors, and textures. But they've had that robbed from them, right? India, I've seen 10 reports that India has gotten rid of Monsanto. I don't know quite where they are with that, but, Monsanto was responsible for the suicide rates in India going up because guys would have about as much land as my backyard to grow a crop because it was free to get the seeds and generally free to plant them and water them. They could at least make a living in India because the cost of living is really low. And even though they don't have the big screen television, the bling bling, they don't need it. They don't want it. They just want to be human, between each other, right? I don't know where it is with China. I've never heard of Monsanto in China, but I'm sure they're there. China's a very complicated place, right? If you need to know about China, go look up the channel up here in YouTube, China Uncensored. Just look at his stuff. He's a little commercial, but he really sort of, I don't know, he walks the fine line between mass media and really interesting knowledge that they seem to have that no one else is talking about. You know, if I'm recommending it, I've seen it for a year plus, maybe even 2 years, and it's pretty phenomenal. He's actually increasing his output right now. So if you want to have a good drop on understanding their economic issues, they actually dispel a lot of the rumors that, you know, it's all collapse over there, right? Dagger of Goodwill. Look for it. You'll find it in your interpersonal relationships as well. And sometimes it's goofy. Sometimes your spouse is just being funny when they do it. But, you know, every once in a while on a blue moon, we get caught up in it and doing it as well to other people. We try to guilt trip them into doing things for us. But in the end, it won't benefit them. Now, it's cool if you want to sacrifice and just say, hey, you know, honey, I don't really want to do this, but, you know, I love you, and so I'm willing to do this. And that's what love's all about, you know, made of, right? But if there's one thing we can get out of the internet before this whole experiment is shut down by some bullshit false flag, would be to increase our awareness of humanity through empathy. And every time you hear this crap, I mean, like they just had the story come out this morning, or maybe last night, this poor little boy died on a beach, and they just had this horrific photograph of him fully dressed, you know, laying face down in the beach when someone comes and pick him up. Well, let's think about it. They're trying to blame the European citizens to say, if you just let this kid come on land without any resistance, this mistake would not have happened. And I can guarantee you the kid died due to a mistake. You know, he fell off the boat, and he got tired, or whatever it was. It wasn't because he was denied out in the sea, right? But they're going to move it that way because there's this agenda to make all this awareness about Syria come up. But what caused the kid's death? A fucked up home country. And I don't know where that kid specifically was, but if he was a Syrian child or anywhere in the ISIS invaded areas, you're talking about really the banking cartels creating this faction called ISIS to scare the living shit out of people, to bomb the living shit out of people. We don't know what's going on over there. America could be running sorties every fucking day over there, and nobody would know. There was a report that came out yesterday, it was talking about how drones, American drone attacks are now off the hook in northern Syria, which is supposedly going after ISIS, right? The whole bullshit theme is that they've created this construct called ISIS, pushed it into Syria, and it's like if they want to bomb Syria, they just constantly say they're going after ISIS. Now, could you imagine that happening in your country? Europe or America? China wants to bomb California. So China creates this weird acronym. They build it out of weird mercenary people that generally have the same race as Caucasian white people. And they just claim that wherever the fuck they want to blow up something, that ISIS was there. Absolutely crazy. But if they need support from their people, they're going to pull this Dagger of Goodwill out and say, well, we got to get rid of the bad people in that other country, right? We wouldn't want those bad people to hurt our friends over there. Just so happens when it comes to Syria, we've already demonized them, right? So some of these episodes go really, really deep, and some of them don't go as deep as others. This is one of the more lighthearted ones in terms of intellectual depth, of being a deep thought. But I want to, hopefully, before you get off this, just make sure that, one, you have now a phrase for the bullshit formula that's going on, right? You know, if someone starts talking about guilt tripping you for any one of the agendas I just talked about, vaccinations, healthcare, immigration, homeless people, all this stuff, they're guilt tripping you at the symptom level of the problem and not at the cause of the issue and who benefits from this fucking problem to begin with, right? Vaccinations are a profit model for pharmaceutical companies that have had a traditionally tough time finding cash to fund multi-billion-dollar drugs. Vaccinations are all about what's called preventive medicine. It is a cash fucking cow for pharmaceuticals. If you haven't heard my audio-only episode on mkultraradio.com. Just go to the website, search on pharma. You're going to find me, break down my entire experience in the pharmaceutical business because I worked at a very privileged level for a very long time. Well, at least long enough to find out all this shit, right? But I guarantee you, at no point were cures ever part of their agenda. Ever. Mandatory health insurance, it's written by the pharmas, the insurance companies, and the medical industry to literally steal money from Americans and shove it into these folks. And you might say, well, other countries have it, so we're just being stupid, and you're being stupid, Mr. MK Ultra person. Well, I'll give you a couple stories about that just real quick to button this baby up. England, for instance, I have a very good friend of mine who's a brilliant comedian and writer and actor over in England, very famous guy, and I asked him about his health care over there, and he said, you know what, when we got health care, it was right after World War II, and he goes, our country wasn't as corrupt as you are now. He goes, you're totally corrupt, and that's when you're actually inventing your health care system, right? He says, you didn't get what we got. I was in a writing class with John Cleese, right, the famous Monty Python guy. My teacher, Robert McKee's at the front of the class teaching, and he used to live in England for a little over 10 years. He warned us. He goes, look, you have no idea what we're getting. He goes, I left England because of the healthcare system, and so did John Cleese. And the story behind John's sitting right behind me, man, just 3 feet behind me, and he was confirming with John. You know, John's a knighted citizen of England. So in terms of being patriotic, he's one of those guys, right? But he lives in Santa Barbara now. And why did he move to Santa Barbara? As I remember the story, his second wife had a medical issue. Very easily corrected, but life-threatening if it wasn't corrected. As the story goes, they waited 10 years on a list to cure her easy problem. Because it wasn't, immediately life-threatening. It was basically if it got really bad. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to know what it was. But the story goes is that he finally picked up everything without moving yet and took her to America and got her cured immediately. Just paid for it, boom, cured. I'm sure it was a huge chunk of change out of his savings, right? And then he picked up everything he owned and moved to Santa Barbara, California. Because he said, fuck that. And now both of them are here. I think McKee lives in Arizona. John in Santa Barbara. And now they're going, holy shit, a more corrupt version of this has now come to America. And they're just biding their time. Both of them are, 20 years probably from exiting the planet. And they're just hoping that by the time that they have to punch out, that there aren't any problems with this system that affect them personally. But, think about it. They're going to get sicker over time, and the system's now getting more and more corrupt. These are expert opinions, people with experience, right? One of my friends, his whole family's a bunch of doctors in Canada, and they always come to America to get all their health care. And I asked him, I said, why do you come to America? You are physicians, and they're mostly dental physicians and stuff, so they don't handle heart problems and all that kind of stuff. I said, why on earth would you come here if you got this amazing national health care in Canada? And they go, because your doctors are better. And I said, why is that? And he goes, because you don't have national health care. People can get paid what they're worth here, so they work harder to become experts. He goes, people come from other countries who are experts just so they can make that cash because they got specialized. And he goes, I guarantee you once national health care starts in America, that specialization will just dissolve away because all the doctors who are specialists will just sunset and no one will have to be a specialist to get the same exact paycheck eventually. Now, we're not quite there yet, but he made an extremely good point. Dagger of Goodwill makes it all possible, right? If we don't fix our neighbors' countries, or at least close the door until they fix it themselves, we're going to have freedom disappear because we will not be able to take on all of these immigrants forever and have our taxes go to pay people that don't have citizenship. And it's not that they don't want citizenship. They do. They do want citizenship. But because the influx is so great, we can't increase the allocation to match the people that come in. But imagine what would happen. It happens in everybody's life on a minuscule level, but imagine if we said, you can't come. Sorry, you can't immigrate here. The flight that you were going to take to come here has been canceled. If you show up, we're going to send you right back. If you come across that border, well, there's a wall now, right? I'd hate to see a wall go up, but honestly, how else do you fight the problem, right? But let's just say theoretically that we could keep everyone out of America who wants to come here is having problems with their country, right? Not just people who are smart who just want to increase their chances of capitalizing on their brilliance, but people who are repressed, right? What happens to individuals when they're backed into a corner? They find the recessive gene of conflict come out. They fight because they've got nothing to lose anymore, right? If they say, well, I'm either going to sit here and suffer or I'm going to fight because I don't want to live in a life of suffering with no freedom, no guns, no protection, no nothing. I could be roughed up and have my family's savings stolen. They can rape my kid and there's nothing I can do because the cops are the ones that did it. You'll see some revolutions. You'll see some civil war. And you'll see the world totally flip. You know, I've said it on the show a couple times. I don't want anyone to lose their culture. Now, it's not that we can't maintain culture within blending. We do all the time. In America, you have every food in the world that's here. But imagine that we lose the source of the culture. We lose the source of the recipes, of the craftsmanship, of the thinking, of the music, because we've all blended together. Now we're all just gray human beings, and we kind of play an amalgamation of everyone's style together. It might be fun for a couple days to watch as an oddity, but in the end, we would lose so much from the from the world population, right? China has been stuck in a stasis mode for nearly 100 years because every time they rise up and they create a bunch of brilliant human beings, their country comes down and kills them. Mao got rid of the most brilliant people in his country. I mean, they've had revolutions for 100 years, right? Just it would show up for like 30 years and then a bunch of people would die and then it would settle down for a little while until these other people filtered up and then they were pushed down. Because the second you have a smart race within a race, right? A smart group of people within a race, they see the government for the repression that they are and they get rid of it. And these people who will sell out their own fucking people, they'll get rid of them. What do they care, right? They have no empathy or sympathy. It's all about self and greed and short-term gains. And believe me, I don't really think they understand. Well, I don't believe they enjoy being at the top and knowing that there's millions of people that wish them harm. I'm sure there's a bit of that for all the politicians in America that are not really acting like American citizens, right? But boy, they'll go up to a campaign microphone and talk about how they're great big Americans, love Jesus and freedom, but everything that they do represses religion and gets rid of rights. And it's always hidden under a Dagger of Goodwill agenda, right? I know you feel me, but I'm just riffing here. So I think that's all I've got on this one. It's just something that when I teach my friends the saying of Dagger of Goodwill, it becomes a lexicon. It becomes a phrase that we use whether they're running into a business situation or interpersonal communication issue. And they'll just say, oh, man, they pulled out the Dagger of Goodwill. And instantaneously, we all understand what's going on. So I wanted to give you that gift. Spread that term. Let's see it in television and film, right? We'll start it right here. Anyway, if you haven't been, go to mkultraradio.com. From there is absolutely everything at the top. I won't beat you over the head with it. If you dig this and you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Like the video if you like it. Give us your comments. Again, the comments have kind of petered off a little bit, but the viewership's up. It's really weird. So if you have videos that kind of accent this or compete with this or whatever, you want to throw your little comment in there, we'd love to hear it. Our website traffic has nearly tripled in the last month, which is kind of cool. So people are chewing these episodes up. The viewership and listening numbers are really strong right now. So I think we're connecting. So it's cool. And it's not about me personally. I'm not building up some weird personal ego. People ask me, like, why don't you say your name? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not into this whole thing. I'm not Alex Jones. This is about us. This is about humanity. This is about a group effort. And I would love to get there to be more group participation. Our Facebook is blowing up, man. I mean, people get in there and they post videos to each other and they thank each other for enlightening each other. We've only had really one person on our site lose his shit and start freaking out, but then even he calmed down, which is cool. So it's okay to freak out. It's okay to call us complete fucking douchebags. You shouldn't say you're all fucking liars and you're a shill and all this. It's cool. Go through that phase. But come back home when it's all over and we'll slaughter the bull and have a feast when you come back. There's no hard feelings, man. You're just going through things that we all go through, right? If you haven't listened to all these, and I know it's a shit ton of content, definitely peruse through the deep thoughts, peruse through our normal show agenda. I think Kyle and I are going to record this Saturday, so the show is going to be back on track here shortly. It's 2 days from now. As you can tell, I'm banging these babies out. There's going to be weeks where I bang them out all the time, and there's going to be weeks where I don't have anything to talk about. So if it goes blank, don't think I'm ignoring the show. It's just I don't want to bring crap to the show. This one was very loose and abstract, but I think it really does plug into a game that they're playing with us. And I think that, the climate's changing. I think the broadcast speak, the way that newscasters speak to you should be absolutely forbidden in your household. Don't let that crap come through your television or someone's talking to you like this. Anyone's not talking like a normal human being, just shut it out of your life. If people are writing articles in the same sort of voice, don't read them. Don't give them the web traffic, right? Just undo the website out of your bookmarks. Don't go to them anymore. I've had to do that for a lot of my stuff. And eventually I'll go back and take a look and see if they're the same. It's like, well, yeah, of course they're the same, right? Our slogan has been two things. We've had two mottos for the show. One is learn the rules that rule you. Again, you're always following those rules anyway. You might as well know explicitly what they are. But the other one that Kyle coined at the very first Maiden Voyage show last year was we're putting the mind back in mind control, right? And I think that that's sort of what Deep Thoughts is trying to do. So we want you to own your brain. We want you to own your opinion. It doesn't matter if it's different than ours. We appreciate all opinions, man. Just make sure you're thinking for yourself. Make sure that your whole life isn't linking off to an article to have someone else say it on your behalf. Figure out how to construct the sentence yourself, and you're going to feel a hell of a lot better having done that, all right? Anyway, take care of yourself. Spread the word. Spread your genius to everybody else because we know you are a genius. And I'm not just saying that, especially if you make it into this thing. My God, you must have some psychotic death wish. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Over and out.